Hi there, and welcome to another episode of the Gentle Business Revolution podcast, the show where we talk about disrupting the current marketing paradigm and changing it to a gentler approach, one that's based on empathy and kindness. I'm Sarah Croce. I'm the host on this show, and you know that you're in the right place if you are a heart-centered entrepreneur or change maker who's looking for a better way to market your business. Or you might also be a marketing impact pioneer. So someone who's working in an organization and you just know that there has to be a better way to connect with your audience. So without further ado, here's today's conversation on the show. Hey, Annie, so glad to connect with you again. We just had the chance to connect already last week when I was on your podcast, and now you're back on mine. So welcome.
Yeah, I am so excited to get to talk to you again.
Likewise. Thanks so much for agreeing to this swap. It's just always like we really get to know each other after these almost 2 hours that we have to talk together, right? That's great.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm an introvert, so I probably wouldn't get to have these really deep conversations with you if we didn't have podcasts. So I'm really grateful.
Yeah. One of the main reasons why I started my podcast is exactly that. Yeah.
Yes.
So, Annie, your business is called The Rebel Therapist. And yeah, the rebel in me loves your name. Obviously, we already noticed that we have quite a few things in common, but tell us about your rebel therapists and kind of how this name came about.
I started noticing that a lot of the people who I work with are in some way busting at the seams of their profession, where they're wanting to work more creatively, or they are feeling like they want to work in a more decolonized way. Maybe they want to bring in other modalities, or they want the people they're serving to get to connect with each other. So, all of these things that kind of would have them busting at the seams of the therapist role. And I also have an inner rebel. And I have also experienced that as a therapist myself, feeling like I'm not getting to use all of my creativity. I'm not getting to use all of myself. And so I decided to really embrace that kind of inner rebellion going on for a lot of my clients and just name it so that these rebels can be together as they're working with me.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. Having worked with some of those rebels or therapists myself, I can tell that there's like this, these industry standards, I think also that maybe
Mhm.
they're rebelling against. It's the same with all these kind of professions that are grouped into these groups. And then it's like, well, this is the standard. Like I'm thinking also of lawyers, for example. It's like,
Mhm.
this is just how it is. And you're supposed to be charging hourly and there's no other way. So in a way, it feels like they're also rebelling against a certain system, right?
Absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah, and there's this I think we can get kind of distracted from our biggest vision when we're only thinking about how has it been done before? What does my license tell me I'm supposed to be doing? What are the people who came before me telling me I'm supposed to be doing? I
Mhm.
think those things are really useful and they're fine to keep in mind, but sometimes we get distracted from the work that we're really meant to do by only thinking about those things and then
Mm.
maybe getting so nervous. I hear this from my clients a lot. They get so nervous about doing anything to harm their license that they can't even think at first about what their really bigger vision is and the kind of work that they're meant to do. So
Right.
I'll ask them sometimes, like, yes, absolutely, we want to respect your license. And can you just set it aside for a moment and allow yourself to dream, allow yourself to step into a vision? And then we'll get back to the license and your questions about it. But can you let go of that and kind of symbolically burn your therapy license so that you can at least let yourself dream about what's possible.
Hmm. I'm wondering also how your rebellion looked like, because you're a therapist as well. So how did you break free? How was that journey for you?
It really helps me to have my businesses very separate. And I
Mm,
actually just closed my therapy practice a year ago now, but I was running both of these businesses side by side for several years, and it helped me a lot to separate them completely. Separate websites, separate bank accounts, separate everything, separate names, so that each one could really flourish and be what it needed to be. I think that kind of set me free early on to look at what is this coaching business going to be and how do I want to work with people. I get to work with people from all over the world, and I get to work in creative ways and get to have them interact with each other, which as a therapist, I wouldn't really be able to do any of that.
mhm,
So the joy of getting to create this business really exactly how I wanted it to, I think that gave me a lot of energy from the
mhm.
very beginning.
So also, I guess when you did your kind of client work, who's my client, all of
Mhm.
that, they are very different kind of people, or descriptions. We're talking about demographics, but also psychographics, right? They're completely different needs, whether it's a therapy client or a coaching client coming to you.
Yeah, that's such a good point because that is trickier, and it doesn't mean that it can't be done, but it's trickier when your clients are more similar for, let's say, your therapy practice and a coaching business. And in that case, I always recommend that people get really clear on the niche for their coaching business so that
Mhm.
when someone comes to them, they will know without getting confused, they'll know whether this person is a good fit for their coaching, and they won't find themselves in this kind of murky water of, are you going to be my therapy client or my coaching client? I really like
Mhm.
to help people get that very clear. So like an example of someone who has done this really well would be Samantha Fox, who just started a program for women coming out later in life. And so that doesn't mean that she couldn't have somebody in her therapy practice who's also working through the same issue. But when
Mhm.
they come to her, be clear, she's got a program, she's got a structured program for women coming out later in life. And so she can tell them about it, they can read about it and have a real clarity. Is this what I'm looking for? Are these my goals? Is this my story or not? So that she's never finding herself in that position of what kind of client should this be?
So what you're saying is, like, if this was a therapy client, they would still be kind of questioning their sexuality and who am I, and all the kind of these who am I questions, right? That's would be more therapy oriented, where the coaching in this case, it's like, I already know, and so here's the program or the coaching specifically for me.
I would say maybe the biggest difference is being able to see there's this structured program that's been laid out for me for this particular part of my journey.
Right.
And then you can recognize right away, especially if the program's been well thought through, they can recognize right away, is this what I'm looking for?
Hmm.
And yeah, usually in therapy, it's going to be more about really open-ended exploration. And it's going to
Right.
be, this may be one of the things you're dealing with, but you also just want room to explore anything that might be coming up in your life.
Hmm. Yeah. So in your work, you focused quite a bit on programs and kind of these courses, right? So let's talk a little bit about that, because yeah, what you help your clients with is basically coming up with a program, and you also talk about the perfect lengths and all of that. So tell us a bit more about this approach that you have to program creation.
Yeah, I like to help people start out with a pilot program really simply.
Hmm.
I sometimes see folks, and I've definitely been tempted by this in the past. I see folks wanting to build out a really complicated kind of business, and they have a dream of having an online course with thousands of people in
Hmm.
it, or they imagine having passive income where they are, just running things behind the scenes and sitting on the beach. And so I want to pull them all the way back into the starting point, which I really love starting people off with just one really simple pilot program within a distinct niche so that they can get started really quickly delivering their program live, and they can give a huge amount of value, and they can also charge good money from the very beginning because they're they're doing it in such an up close way, and they're delivering those services. And the people I work with are not brand new to serving people. So they already have a lot of education and experience and value to give, although they do struggle with imposter syndrome, which I think we all do.
Yeah.
But they're already ready to be delivering really high value services. So I want to get them started doing that in a simple way from the very beginning.
So it's what I'm hearing is more of a group coaching experience, and not so much maybe this dream of passive income and build it and put it up on your website and you'll have, money coming in overnight. Is that
Right. That these
correct?
people are just going to suddenly show, like thousands of people are going to just
Yeah.
suddenly show up.
And
Which
unfortunately,
maybe
that's a
when,
lot of what we hear when we hear
yes,
online course. We're like, oh, that's great. I'll just put up the videos and then they'll just sell itself. And
yes,
we both know, and a lot of people know that it's just doesn't work like that, right?
absolutely. Like people maybe understandably want to believe that that's going to happen, but
Hmm.
that's not how it works unless you're already famous.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so I do recommend that people start with a simple format. So I recommend one-on-one coaching as a really great way to start. Even if someone wants to move away eventually from one-on-one, I recommend, if they're at all on the fence, starting with one-on-one coaching in a structured way. And then that can be really easy to scale into small group coaching. Or if they feel like, no, I know I want people interacting together from the beginning, then to go ahead and start with a small group live program. Or another format that some of my clients have had success with is retreats. So in person, we can finally begin to do this again as we're recording this. In-person retreats are another great offer. And they're harder, but for some folks it's worth it to start there because that's just such an important part of their vision.
So essentially, when you're saying you're helping your clients with course creation, that doesn't mean it has to be, just a group program or an online course. It could be something that you teach them in a retreat or even with one-on-one clients. So it's almost like more you help them with the framework
Yeah,
and not so much.
and I usually don't even use the word course,
Mhm.
although sometimes people create courses when they're working with me. I really look at it as a pilot offering, a pilot
Right.
program. And so we look first at what is the transformation that you want to help create. So if the
Hmm.
person who's completely ready for this transformation contacts you, by the time they're done with the program, what do you want the transformation to be? And so we
Right.
work on making that kind of the right size and not trying to overpromise and making it really specific and clear. And then we reverse engineer that transformation by looking at, okay, what's the fastest, simplest way to help them get there? And so
Right.
sometimes that shows up as a retreat, sometimes it shows up as maybe a short one-on-one coaching program, or sometimes it's something else.
How do clients know, or how do you help them maybe understand which one of these options, so retreat, online course, group coaching, is the best fit for them, but also for their ideal clients?
I have them go through an exercise that I call the superpower worksheet, where they're really thinking through, what are my gifts? When I'm
Mm,
working at my very best, what am I doing? And sometimes they need to free themselves up because they've been told to work just one way. So they explore a bit, when I'm really in my zone, how am I relating to people? What kind of guide am I? And then we make sure that that's built into the program.
mm,
And we also look at, okay, with this particular niche, with this particular group of folks and this transformation, what's going to work for them? So we try to find that kind of place on the Venn diagram where there's overlap there. So if someone wants to work with single moms, there probably needs to be some flexibility in looking at what are the hours of this program and making recordings available, and allowing there to be a structure that's going to work for most
right.
single moms. And then for other folks, Krista Harrison just created a retreat for queer healers. And so that's something that a lot of healers have been craving, is I want a way to kind of escape from my life for a little bit, do some healing, especially around this time with, the this next phase of the pandemic. And I want to get away with a group of people I feel safe with. So that it's sometimes going to be about exploring what is really missing for this group of people.
Right. Yeah. So it's really at the intersection of what feels good to you. Where is your superpower? I talk about the gentle marketing superpowers as well. So,
Yeah.
what feels good to you? Where are you in your zone, like you said? And then also, of course, yeah, you need to find that resonance with your ideal client, and then creating from that knowledge, and yeah, creating something beautiful that works for both of you. That's great. So once we know, okay, yeah, I think this is what I want to create, where do you usually start, or where do you help them to start?
From there, I want them to just create an outline, a really simple outline of what is this offer going to look like, where they know this is the most important goal of the program. I want people to walk away with this one thing. And then we look at, okay, so creating an outline of how you're going to help them get there, but having some flexibility in it. So you're not creating something with like 1,000 bullet points, because you actually don't know the first time you run something what is going to be the most pace they're going to need to go at, and what they're going to want more of or less of. So I encourage people to create an outline. And for people who are kind of overachievers, I encourage them to have, you can have plenty of material that you might bring in, but to have everything really pared down to a simple outline that you're going to allow to guide you. And in that way, you can be getting feedback from the very beginning as you're delivering the program. So the next step is creating that outline of their program, and then writing a simple, honest sales page where they're
Mm,
describing, this is who this is for, this is what it is designed to deliver, and this is how we're going to do it. So just a simple, no manipulation sales page, which I know that you resonate with, like
mhm,
having honesty and just transparency in all of your marketing. And then from there, I encourage them to start share it with everybody they know, share it with their dream participants and all of their colleagues, and to do it in a way that really helps their colleagues feel included. So telling them in a vulnerable, honest way from the very beginning, this is what I'm creating. This is why I'm so excited to create it. And I want you to be part of it. I want you to tell me what you think should be included. I want you to tell me if you know anyone who's looking for this. And like, let's say if you're working with queer healers, you can ask all of your colleagues, okay, with the queer healers, what are they looking for? What do you think they need from a program? And so that helps your colleagues feel really like they kind of belong with you and that they're part of this project with you.
When you say colleagues, I guess that's kind of unique to the therapist community. It feels like there's this term colleagues that we as entrepreneurs don't know so much. So I love that you can just tap into this kind of community of colleagues. I guess we have peers, but they also, there's always, they have their own business. So yes, you can ask them, but it's like asking them for their time. So is this something that the therapist community is like, yeah, it seems like they're much more open to that kind of helping each other.
Oh, that's so interesting. Maybe. I mean, I think we all have people who want to support us. I think sometimes it can feel like it's hard to ask for help. It's hard to ask for, hey, will you help me promote this thing? I think is maybe one of the scariest things to ask.
It's also an introvert thing, right? It's
Yeah.
like, yeah.
Yes.
I just thought when you said colleagues, it sounded like, more than just friends. Like I wouldn't refer to them necessarily maybe as colleagues. I would
Mhm.
refer to them as, yeah, entrepreneur friends. So I thought you meant like we're all therapists. And so we're all
No, and I
colleagues.
think you're right about that too. I think you're right. And a lot of therapists, when they're stepping into something like coaching or retreat creation, they're actually afraid of being judged by other therapists. And they're
Mm-hmm.
afraid that other therapists are going to say, like, what are you doing? And
Yeah.
coaching isn't as amazing as therapy. And what are you stepping into? So they have these voices going on in their
Right.
head that they're imagining coming from their colleagues. And there's some truth to it. But also, that's part of the reason that I really encourage people from the very beginning to bring those other therapists in and have conversations with them
Mm-hmm.
to kind of bust through that and to perhaps even inspire other therapists instead of feeling like, oh, I'm going to be judged for this. I have to keep it a secret. That's not a good way to grow a business. The
Right.
best way to grow a business is to get into conversations with other folks, other service providers, and kind of invite them along. So, yeah, I definitely work with a lot of introverts and I work with a lot of people who I think would identify as perfectionists. And it really scares the hell out of them to press send on that first email that I encourage them to write about, hey, this is my project. I'm so excited about it. I want to share it with you. I want to talk to you about it if you're open. And pressing send, even though it's scary, can sometimes really help them bust through and feel like, yeah, this is real. I'm really doing this. And it also does help them bring in participants.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right. I remember talking to or working with those therapists turned coaches, and there was some kind of extra judgment, I guess, because
Mhm,
exactly because of that rebellion, right? Because there's like, well, who are you to rebel against the system? So it
mhm,
feels like it takes extra courage to say, but I'm doing things differently. It doesn't mean that 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 is not okay or is not according to norms, and who even made these norms. But it
mhm.
does feel like, yeah, there's extra judgment if you're breaking free from that system that is kind of built around just charging hourly, for example. So
Yeah.
clients saying, well, how can I charge more than the standard therapy rate in my town? So there seems to be this extra courage needed to break free from that.
Yes. Absolutely. And sometimes I want to help people reframe that when they're thinking, gosh, if I raise my rates or if I don't even use an hourly rate and
Hmm.
I create a program
Hmm.
with an all-inclusive price, I'm going to be so judged. And then one reframe I want to encourage people to use is thinking about, could you actually be helping your colleagues and your peers when you go ahead and take a stand and set that higher price or work in this new way? Think about it more as, if you get pushback, think about how much you may actually be helping them rethink things themselves. Because I don't know about you, but sometimes my first reaction to things is to want to poke holes in it or to want to ask questions, to want to be critical. That doesn't mean that's where I'm going to land. Sometimes that's just my way of trying something on.
Yeah. Yeah. And then once you sit back, you think about it, you're like, it just kind of opens another perspective that you hadn't even thought was possible before because nobody else ever did it. Yeah.
Yes. And
Mm.
sometimes when we get that pushback from someone else, we can feel like, oh, okay, you're right. Never mind. I won't do this thing. And that's not the right answer.
Yeah. I also it just occurred to me that we're talking about therapists, but this applies to basically any kind of, what's the right word, not job, any kind of activity where we have these hourly rates. So I'm thinking
Yes.
of my client who's a yoga teacher. I'm thinking of healers, like you said before, of, naturopaths, all these kind of things where it's like, oh, you go there and you pay an hourly rate. How could you ever turn it into something else? So I
Hmm.
just think it's important for our listeners to understand that this is not just, an episode about therapists. It goes for so many other activities where this can be, yeah, really, really useful to think, how could I take this to another level? So,
Absolutely. Even like I just one example came up
mhm,
yesterday for me is podcast editors, right? Like,
mhm,
as if you're a podcast editor and you're thinking, well, this is the price I have to charge and this is exactly what needs to be included, and allow yourself to think more openly, well, what is really the transformation I want to help people with, and how would I want to package that, and how would I
right.
want to charge for it? Yeah, so I totally agree with you. Therapists can be maybe a little extra weird about this, but it is completely a universal entrepreneur thing.
Yeah, yeah. There's a rebel in everyone, so we just need
Yes.
to call that rebel. So let's say we created this program, and we talked to all our colleagues and created the sales page, and yet nobody signs up, or maybe one or two people sign up. How do you help your clients with the resilience and saying, okay, now what? Where do I go next?
Yeah. I For one thing, I would encourage them to give yourself a minute to be bummed, give yourself a minute to be disappointed and to cry if you need to, or not just if you need to, if your body wants to, allow yourself
Mhm.
to cry. And then also to know this is completely normal. This happens some of the time. Sometimes you just hit it out of the park the first time, but often you don't. And that is completely normal. And if they're still passionate about this niche, which they almost always are, if they're still
Mhm.
passionate about the niche and they know that there's a need there because they've done that work on interviewing people, thinking through the niche, talking to their colleagues, then they don't need to panic. It's really just time to reiterate and look at, what do I want to change here? If it was a group offer, maybe I want to try a one-on-one offer. It's so much
Mhm.
easier to sell a one-on-one offer and to
Yeah.
get started with it. So that could be what happens with the next iteration. They can look at their marketing and see, is there something here that's not really naming the problem that I know this niche has?
Mhm.
So I encourage them to reiterate changing maybe one or two things, but not changing everything. Because if we run an experiment by changing everything the second time, let's say it works, we don't really know why it worked because we changed everything.
Mhm.
Or if it doesn't work, then again, we don't really know what were the elements that we needed to change and what were the other ones. So I really want to get them into the mindset of seeing this as just a series of experiments and iterations.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's true that so often we launch one thing and then we're discouraged because it doesn't work, and then we launch a new other thing
Mm,
and then maybe that doesn't work. So it's like, throwing spaghetti at the wall and just seeing, okay, a- and and actually, if we do put the work in it and create this program, then at least, give it another chance, and like you say,
mhm.
change one or two things, and maybe it was just the audience that was not ready yet. I think there's something to say about timing as well, not
Yes.
just, oh, maybe it was during, you promoted it during a holiday or whatever. I also think in kind of this universal timing, like, and that means a lot. What I'm trying to say is, like, it has to do with really slowing down everything and
Mm,
taking this much longer outlook to business and say, you know what, maybe this wasn't the year. Like, let's talk about 2020. I don't think that was the year for, like, very many things probably
mhm.
didn't go well. And so just also respecting the timing and saying, well, I'm not going to give up on this completely, but I just don't feel like putting the energy in it right now. Let
Mhm.
me kind of come back to it maybe the year later, and give it another try. Because the other question then is, I guess, is like, when is it time to pull the plug and say, really, I'm fed up, this is not working.
I would say if somebody is losing passion for that niche and they're not just discouraged where they could, take a retreat, allow themselves to feel bummed out and then come back with new energy, where
Hmm.
there's something more going on where they're really, losing energy for that niche, I
Hmm.
think that could be a good time to change course, pivot, look at what, apply everything they learned to a new niche.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
other than that, I wouldn't say that I could imagine wanting someone to pull the plug or encouraging them to pull the plug because there are going to be people looking for the medicine that they have, the healing that they have. So it's really going to be about continuing to be curious, continuing to be looking for, well, what is that thing that they're looking for? But I mean, I love encouraging people to quit things that are not working for them. So if there's a feeling of this has become kind of drudgery, this isn't the thing I want to be doing, then I think it's time to pull the plug and do something different. But sometimes I think the reason I'm so, I don't want people to pull the plug is I see people quitting when I think they should be iterating. And
Mm.
I think, like all entrepreneurs, it's kind of a hidden thing how much quote unquote failure is involved in being an entrepreneur and just how we don't see it. What we see is the success of others, but they really have had everybody who we see who is successful now, completely including me, have had so many bummer moments where, something didn't work, nobody bought something, and where, they went through moments of feeling discouraged.
Mm. I think the problem is that there's just so much unknown as an
Mhm.
entrepreneur. We're like, is it worth sticking with this? Like, do I really have something here? Or, why is nobody buying it? We keep thinking, well, if nobody buys it, why would I invest more energy in it? So
Mhm.
it's just such a difficult decision, right? And I agree with you. Most of the time, it probably is worth sticking with it. But other times, it's also, I remember I built this program for LinkedIn, for business to business. And I was putting a lot of energy, also quite a bit of money in it, because, I kept having to upgrade the tools and website and blah, 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 like years and years. And eventually I came across this research. Can't remember who was writing about this, but they were talking about the sunk cost
Oh,
of
yes.
something, when you're like, okay, you could actually invest not just the money, but the energy that you're losing on trying to get this thing to work. You could, also use it somewhere else and create something new and fresh that, again, lights you up. And I think what you said at the beginning, that's just the main thing. And like, if you lose passion and it just becomes an obsession almost, just because you want to sell it, that's when okay, time to move on.
That's such a helpful story and clarification, because I think pulling the plug on a particular program anytime,
Right.
but you didn't pull the plug on your career or on helping entrepreneurs. You just pivoted. And
Right.
so, yeah, I love that story of looking at, sunk cost fallacy. Like, what would you do? This is kind of a question for folks when they're in that moment of feeling like, should I pull the plug on this program? It's like, would you create this now? If you didn't have it,
Yeah.
what would you do to create it now? And if the answer is like, no, I would not want to start this now, then that's okay. It's time to pivot. Like you get to, that's the beautiful thing about being a company of one or a very small company. It's like, you don't even have to talk to the board of directors. You just get to decide.
I love that question, because it's exactly what Marie Kondo does when you like look through your closet and you pick up this thing, this dress. Would I buy this now? Right?
Yes.
If the answer is no, then it's time to get rid of it. So the same thing can be applied to programs. Love that.
Yeah. Like, do I want to bring this into the future with me or not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is so good. I look at the time, but I want to definitely ask this one more question, because when I was on your show, and if it's ready when this one releases, we'll put the link to your episode in there. We talked mainly, you asked me kind of behind the scenes business questions. And so we went over my programs and what I have in offer. And it was almost like a coaching session to me. And it really made me realize, okay, there is definitely some complexity in my business, even though, as I shared with you, simplicity is definitely my number one goal. And I have everything streamlined and all of that, but there is some complexity. And so it kind of struck me when I looked at your website. I'm like, oh, I get why she's asking these questions. It's because I see only like this one offer that you have on your site. And so is that really just the one offer that you have, or are there other things that you're doing that are just maybe not on your website? And if it is the only offer, how does that work for you?
Yeah, I love that question. So I do have 3 offers, and the way that I've been keeping things really simple for myself is that I only mostly market Create Your Program,
Mhm.
and that's a really good place for people to start with me in just creating that pilot like I've been talking about. And I also have a mastermind program, and usually it's been for folks who already went through Create Your Program
Mhm.
and now they're ready for ongoing support, because Create Your Program is only 5 weeks long.
Right.
So the mastermind is 8 months, and we get to do just a ton of deeper work, and I get to help people build their entire business. But I wasn't marketing the mastermind until really recently. And so now the way that I market the mastermind, or just the way that I let people know about it, is through my email list, and then also once in a while on my podcast.
Mhm.
Because I found a couple of people recently who are in my current mastermind found it, even though I didn't have it linked in a way that you could easily find it.
That's
And they applied and they were a great fit. And I realized, okay, I don't actually need to keep this completely secret. Like I want to keep things simple, but I'm kind of in transition now to looking at how can I keep things really simple, but also let the right people know about my programs.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm always kind of trying to find a good formula for those things.
I love your approach also on keeping things simple, and because my coach told me once that it's almost like each program or each offering in your business could be a standalone business. So
Hmm.
for example, there's podcasters who make their podcast their whole business. And then there's, people who have a paid newsletter and that's their whole business. And that's just kind of the things that we do for free. So
Hmm.
obviously, all of these things add complexity, and all of it takes time. So it's really about also managing your energy and making sure that you don't burn out in your business. So I appreciate you sharing that, and I, I I love that it works for you, keeping it that simple. That's great.
Yeah. And some people say that they would be bored doing one offer over and over again.
Hmm.
And for me, that's not the case because every time I run these things, I'm getting completely different energy from the people in them. And especially in the mastermind, we get to go pretty deep. So
Hmm.
even though it's all about business, I'm sure you experienced this too, Sarah. It's like it's all about business, and yet we really get to work on all kinds of mindset issues around business. So,
It's a holistic
yeah.
approach to business. Yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes I think people add maybe too many complicated offers within more than one niche and kind of go all over the place because they're afraid of being bored. And
Hmm.
I don't I don't find that to be an issue.
Yeah, I think it's very personal
That's
as
true.
well. It's like different people have different levels of boredom. And who
Absolutely.
says that you can change it one day when you do get bored? Because
That's right.
I definitely got bored of just doing LinkedIn, right? But it took 10
Yeah.
years. So I think as entrepreneurs, that's the great thing. We can pivot and change whenever we want as well. Yeah.
100%. Yeah, if you had told me like 5 years ago that my business would look like this now, I would have been really surprised. So I
Right.
remind myself of that often where you had no idea what this thing is gonna look like 5 years from now, and
Of
that's
course.
kind of exciting.
Yeah. Well, this has been really great. So delighted to had another chance to talk to you, Annie. This was great. Please do share with people where they can find out more about you and about your offering.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Sarah. I love talking to you. I love how you interview and just I could talk to you all day. So people can find me at rebeltherapist.me, and that's where you can find my podcast and all my resources.
Wonderful. Yeah. I always have one last question that I ask all my guests, and that is, what are you grateful for today or this week, Annie?
Well, this is kind of nerdy, but right now I'm really grateful for my garden and my houseplants. They're
Ooh.
just giving me so much joy and pleasure every day.
So I guess in California, we're in May, so it's already almost like summertime, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
And my plants are loving it.
It's great. Thanks so much. This has been wonderful, Annie. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks so much for watching until the very end. If you haven't subscribed yet, click on that subscribe button so that you're informed whenever I release a new episode here on the YouTube channel. Also, if you're new here and you don't have your one-page marketing plan yet, make sure you subscribe at sarahsandacroce.com/one page, the number one, and then page to download your one-page marketing plan that takes you through this journey of a gentler approach to marketing. So it comes with an email series that takes you through the 7 Ps and really offers some deep reflections about these different second kind of piece, the gentler way to market. So again, sarahsonacroce.com/one page. Thanks so much and see you next time.